Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and the date today is Tuesday, November 26th, 2024. I've been doing a daily countdown of my 366 favorite video games of all time, and coming in at number 36 is Hades. Hades is the newest full release from Supergiant Games. Early access doesn't count. And when I ranked Bastion, Supergiant Games' debut title, as my 60th favorite game, my twin brother left a comment on that video that he was shocked it didn't rank higher, because he knows how much I simply adore that game. Seriously, it's so great. I said that I would address that when I rank Hades, but Patreon member Okami also left a comment that pretty much sums it up. Once upon a time, yes, this was one of the greatest games ever, until Hades blew it out of the water. and yeah, Okami's absolutely correct. Not only is Hades the best game that Supergiant Studios, one of my favorite developers, has ever made, it's also my favorite roguelike. I do want to mention that while I am very aware of how the story for this game ends and have watched the boss fights for the rest of the game, I haven't beaten it. Much like with Hollow Knight, Hades is what I've been referring to as a break glass in case of emergency game, where it was on my backlog of stuff I knew I would love, but had not yet actually played personally before the start of the year, so I could safely rank it higher if I ran into an issue with getting games recorded throughout the year, like if there was some technical problem or whatever. And oh so highly it did rank. Oh, and I should probably mention, I decided it was getting ranked at the end of November after playing it for only 3 hours. That's how quickly I was like, yep, this game is amazing, this game is special. And I highly suspect I will rank it even higher once I grind through the game to beat it for myself. So, what's going on here? You are Zagreus, the son of Hades, but you kind of don't want to be. Having spent your entire life in the underworld, you decide it's high time you try to escape. Which is a lot easier said than done, of course. Your real motivation is to learn not only more about the outside world, but lingering questions you have about yourself, and some of that gets revealed as you go. The story here is kind of slow, getting just tiny little tidbits as you progress further and further towards the surface, or interacting with people back at home after each of your deaths. And I'm more than okay with it being a drip feed, because the combat is the greatest isometric action combat I have ever played, and it's just straight up not close. The game is structured around the concept that, being the son of Hades, Zag cannot truly die. If he does die, his body and soul are just reborn back at his father's home. There's definitely stuff to do at home before you head out on your next great escape attempt. You can chill with Cerberus, your loving 3-headed dog. You can hang out at a tavern, bar, cafeteria? Something like that, and talk it up with other dead people in Greek mythology. In fact, you'll randomly find all sorts of dead people from Greek mythology hanging out. It's just a super cool place. You have your own chamber, of course, where you can spend a resource called Darkness to upgrade your character, helping you to become stronger with each failed attempt, easing the difficulty curve as you also just learn from your mistakes and get better at the game. Speaking of getting better at the game, you also have a ton of different weapons to pick from. This is where the game is most like Bastion. I think one of Bastion's greatest strengths is how different each weapon is, and yet also how effective they all can be, and Hades makes those weapon differences look like a tech demo. Each weapon not only has radically different basic attacks with tangible differences in damage, speed, range, and even like the weight you feel in the feedback from the game, they also have special attacks and movement differences too, and the more you play with each weapon, the better that weapon feels to use as you figure out its actual strengths. The game even encourages you to do this by giving you bonus rewards for one weapon at a time, changing randomly from run to run. That's far from the only thing that'll change with each run, of course. That's like the point of roguelikes. The first thing you do when you start a new run is receive one of your relatives, the other Greek gods, as a visitor. There's dialogue here, and it's actually one of the ways that the story can develop, but usually it's just world-building banter. You pick a boon from whichever god it is, and get going. Each god focuses on different types of bonuses for you, and there's random options available with different rarities to them even. So sometimes you get something really cool and already know it's going to be a great run. The rest of the run sees you moving through different rooms, typically having to clear every enemy in them for a reward before you pick the next room you get to. There's a symbol indicating which kind of reward you'll get in that room, so you can kind of craft the path you want to take as you go. Some are going to be more boons from other gods, some could be upgrading your existing boons, many will be different kinds of resources you can use to buy items or upgrade your character, or even gifts that you can give to many of the characters you run into, sometimes in exchange for like a little trinket or other bonus. You can pick up one trinket at a time to have active, giving you some kind of bonus. And there are ways to level up each trinket in order to make that bonus even bigger. Even when you don't get a mechanical reward for these gifts, however, you still learn some more backstory and other world building to the game, including often little subplots based on the interpersonal relationships with the denizens of the Otherworld or with the gods on Olympus. It turns out that Zagreus is pretty popular. He's very well liked. The game has an absolutely insanely massive codex, just overflowing with information. They really went all out when it came to the amount of writing in this game. Obviously, they had a bit of a leg up, being able to base it all on Greek mythology, so they didn't exactly have to do all the creative work from the ground up, but it's still done very well. You can often choose the difficulty of your path as well in some ways, with some doors having skulls over them, indicating they're more of a challenge, but often for a bigger reward. The things you get for besting each room isn't the only part of them that's random either, with special events and other things that can pop up. For example, you can descend into the realm of chaos and choose a huge benefit that comes at a delay, at the cost of a typically very unfortunate downside for a set number of rooms. These are just a few of the ways you can really make each run feel unique and exciting, and there's so many more, especially as you get to the different regions of the Underworld. As you travel through the enormity of it all, you'll eventually reach an end boss for that area. Beat it, and you gain some rewards, but also move on to the next place. These bosses are one of the very few things not random about the game and are consistent from run to run. Learning all of their tricks is an absolute blast, and I know that the first time I fought against Megara, I thought she just felt impossible. How in the world could I ever beat an enemy that moves so fast while filling the room with bullet hell-like attacks and also summoning additional enemies that fight me that I need to deal with before they get too overwhelming? Eventually, you learn the movement patterns and identify pauses in attacks where you can get in there and do some damage. Some weapons are also much better than others against specific bosses, so if you're really struggling against one boss, maybe try a different weapon to see if it makes that matchup a little better. Now, I've probably beaten her 6 or 7 runs in a row. I cannot overstate how remarkable the combat is in regards to diversity of strategies, allowing for massive player expression, but also just how literally perfect the game feel is. Even the enemy variety is phenomenal, with enemies that require you to move in different ways to dodge their attacks, or maybe approach them in different ways, with different weapons even. Like there's a bomb throwing guy that is tough if you're doing something really up close, but gets a lot easier if you're doing the bow. But that doesn't mean that being up close you can't deal with them. You just need to move and use your locomotion tools in order to preserve your health. Playing this on my Steam Deck has been the best experience I've had on that platform since I got it, and recording on my better PC to get this footage at not a very low resolution felt almost foreign to me. Playing on a controller is absolutely the way to go here, but I want to be clear. Just because the combat is the main reason to play this game does not mean it is the only reason. Quite far from it, actually. The story here, while slow, is quite good and fits well within the world, both in the sense of your personal actions, but also the complex political and personal motivations of a pantheon of gods. Of particular note is just the amount of casual conversations you have with each of these characters, resulting in ongoing subplots that don't really matter in the slightest to the main story, but may actually be even more gripping in leading me to dig for more. Giving a character a gift and then them divulging some juicy morsel of information is so satisfying, and sometimes I just can't wait to find another gift to give that person because I want to know what they're going to say next. The music, like every Supergiant Games title, is remarkable, and Darren Korb is an absolute treasure. As you've been able to very clearly see, the extreme stylization of the art holds up in every single frame, with great attention to detail that makes the world feel alive and responding to my every action. No stone was left unturned for this game, and no detail was too small. And I'm not alone in this opinion of how borderline perfect the execution of this game is. Members of my Patreon can submit a ranked list of their own favorite games, up to 366 titles themselves if they wish, and then each of those games receive weighted points based on their rankings. I have an overall community ranking database that I integrate those lists into, and it adds all of those points up and puts them in order. On the inaugural version of the list, Hades is currently ranked as the greatest game ever made by my Patreon community. I'm really excited to see if it can hold on to a spot when I do a big update with new lists coming up in January, but for now, it is king. Until then, you can join me tomorrow as I continue my countdown and talk about my 35th favorite game, where we do what we must because we can.